What is the key factor that opens the door for the implantation of a destructive program into the subconscious of teenagers, driving them to enact such horrific scenarios? To understand the true nature of what is happening, let's delve into the details of how representatives of anti-cultism use methods of covert programming to influence a person's subconscious to commit a school shooting. How do they manage to code a teenager to execute their malicious will?
Method of puzzle piece coding. First, representatives of anti-cultism select a region where, according to their goals and objectives, it will be strategically advantageous to create a school shooting incident. The organization and planning of such a terrorist act in the chosen region happen long before the actual event, usually from 1 to 3 years, depending on the significance and importance of the event for them. The coding of a teenager to carry out an armed attack is done remotely, using the method of subliminal information embedding through mass media and the internet. To create a new school shooting, they use a method of puzzle piece coding, that is, a method of covert manipulation by directing multiple waves of information coding. Each wave individually contains specific embedded messages that, like puzzle pieces, come together in the depths of the potential shooter's subconscious. Only when these pieces combine do they activate the program to commit mass murder. As a result of this activation, the individual goes through with the crime, while to an observer, it appears as if it was their personal decision. No one met with them, directly incited them, or helped them prepare. They didn't even discuss the topic with anyone. In reality, they act as a bio-robot, guided by a skilled hand to carry out a premeditated criminal plan. This segmentation of manipulative embeds into several waves of information delivery is intentional and serves the purpose of precise targeting. Since a school shooting requires one, at most 2 perpetrators, the waves of information coding affect thousands of people. Some of these people may even feel an impulse to act on the commands, but not everyone can cross the line into committing mass murder. Therefore, to narrow down the target zone and activate a suitable potential shooter, a cross-sectional information attack is conducted. It consists of several information deliveries, each containing specific embeds that can bypass the critical control of the conscious mind and penetrate directly into the subconscious. Once there, these embeds come together like a puzzle to form a cohesive picture of the future crime. This image becomes a dominant intrusive thought, pushing the individual towards committing mass murder. When planning the next school shooting, representatives of anti-cultism first study the demographics of the target school, their interests, and popular internet and media resources among them. Then, by placing materials on these media resources, considering trends in the teenage environment, they launch multiple waves of information coding that contain hidden embeds. Moreover, these infected messages are typically spaced out over time, meaning they don't necessarily need to be released into the information space simultaneously. The key is that they all superpose in the perception of a specific individual. Their combination in the potential shooter's subconscious triggers the command to execute the implanted program. The initial information coding attacks have a broad range of impact. The final wave of the attack and additional corrective measures are carried out directly within the target school. These give the start command to the shooter. Representatives of anti-cultism first launch preparatory waves of information coding, followed by targeting and activating waves. This series of precautionary measures allows them to control the exact number of perpetrators of a terrorist attack and the quality of its execution. The first preparatory wave, which serves as the foundation for the subsequent layering of all puzzle piece embeds into a single picture, is the glorification of previous school shooting perpetrators. The primary factor that representatives of anti-cultism exploit here is the human desire for fame.
Therefore, all the narratives glorifying shooters implanted by representatives of anti-cultism exploit a person's desire for popularity and widespread attention. It doesn't matter how the information about the shooters is spread. It could be condemning their actions or justifying them, a biographical sketch, or a dramatization of events. Anything goes. The critical aspect is the news coverage and the manipulative message embedded in it. Thus, an image of the criminal is created, surrounded by an aura of fame and admiration despite the wrongfulness of their actions. What does a teenager see when they encounter this information? They see that an ordinary student, just like them, who felt undervalued, gained worldwide fame with a single act. Now, the top popular media write about them, celebrities talk about them, and they become a sort of idol for others. It is precisely the desire to become famous, the thirst for fame, that serves as the fertile ground in which the seeds of evil sown by real terrorists take root, provoking children to commit crimes.
My name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018. My goal is at least 20 people with an AR-15 and a couple tracer rounds.
She is infatuated with Columbine's school shooting. Police say she was armed and extremely dangerous.
Well, I will be. Columbine, Virginia Tech, none of them will beat me. I'll kill them all.
Remember Columbine!
He was arrested. BBC News investigation spanning the country uncovered chilling evidence, video diaries. Here's that Minnesota suspect talking to police in May.
My number one idol is Eric Harris.
An era of active shooter events really began with Columbine.
Thus, the first implant penetrates the subconscious of the potential shooter. The notion that the most important purpose in life is to gain fame and recognition, and without this, life is meaningless. The deep-seated subconscious fear of living an obscure life pushes the teenager toward committing the crime. If you look at the profiles of shooters from this perspective and their explanations for their actions, you will clearly see that the desire to become famous is the one common trait they all share. Here is a crucial point. If the glorified image of a shooter did not exist, school shootings would cease to be possible, because without this foundational base, the rest of the program for carrying out the act would not have the necessary support to be executed.
The dissemination of glorified images of criminals as bait for those who also crave popularity acts as a filter, screening out those unsuitable for the role of perpetrator, and infecting those with the active trigger that sets off the program's unpacking. Another filter is the specific method of selecting themes through which the program components for executing a school shooting are embedded. These themes are chosen from the areas of interest to teenagers, which are typically opposite in nature. What does this mean, and why is it done? A person is more likely to be interested in related topics. For example, someone interested in astronautics might also be interested in parachuting. However, to minimize the number of people caught in the cross-section of the informational coding waves, topics are chosen that rarely fall within the sphere of interest of the same person all at once. For instance, a teenager might be fascinated by space and the possibility of life on other planets, such as astrobiology. What would be opposite in nature to this interest? Life's opposite is death. So, a teenager potentially suitable for the role of a shooter might also be interested in different models of weapons. This combination of interests is rare in real life, which is precisely what anti-cultism representatives count on. Subsequently, various materials on these themes are embedded with other components of the single program for carrying out a school shooting. Particular emphasis is placed on awakening an interest in weapons as tools that grant power and fame. As a result, only those teenagers who are simultaneously interested in both opposing themes and who already have a dominant desire for fame and recognition fall into the crosshairs of these intersecting waves of information coding. Thus, the target group gradually narrows down through the final stage of the coding process. The first wave of information coding affects thousands. Then from these thousands, only hundreds remain, and ultimately, only a few individuals are caught in the crossfire of all the necessary coding waves. It then becomes a matter of time to see who among them activates first, and who ultimately becomes the perpetrator of the implanted program. This is why shooters often appear entirely different from one another, with diametrically opposed personality traits, frequently without significant psychological issues, and most importantly, without apparent motives for committing such crimes.
Let me give you an example of an inducing wave of information coding that activates a teenager's program to commit a school shooting. The start command doesn't necessarily come through the media or the internet. It could be delivered by a guest lecturer at the school who incidentally mentions a person in their talk who dedicated their entire life to science but never gained worldwide recognition or fame. In contrast, the lecturer then cites Nobel laureates as examples, few in number, but they were able to achieve success. What embed does the potential shooter receive here? Their subconscious gets the directive that neither science nor diligent effort brings fame, and that life's meaning isn't in discoveries or hard work, but in popularity. For if no one knows you, you're wasting your life. Therefore, there's no point to your existence. From an outside perspective, such a lecture might seem noble, yet it serves as the trigger for activating the shooter. After a short period, one of the students at this school will commit an armed attack on others. Several months may pass between the lecture and the tragic event, by which time no one will remember or connect the person to the reasons for this tragedy. From a legal standpoint, there's no grounds for charges of incitement because the lecturer didn't even mention school shootings in their talk. In this way, through purposeful information coding, the subconscious program for committing mass murder is activated in the teenager unnoticed by others. Thus, out of thousands of teenagers affected by intersecting waves of information coding, only a few become future shooters. This transformation occurs only in schools where the final stage of subconscious programming, the activation phase of the embedded command, has been completed. That's why, seemingly out of nowhere, children develop an attraction to weapons and a desire to inflict harm on others. Just an image that bypassed the critical perception of the conscious mind, penetrated deep into the subconscious, and triggered action. As a result, a teenager who recently made plans for the future dreamed of romantic relationships and chose a university or college to attend after school. Suddenly, with the obsession of a psychopath, starts planning a real terrorist attack. Thus, cynically and cold-bloodedly, representatives of anti-cultism skillfully manipulate the pliable minds of future executors for their malicious intent. They turn your children into terrorists and mass murderers. Even if only one out of hundreds of thousands of children brings this image to life, it is more than enough for representatives of anti-cultism and the force behind them to continue their destructive activities to destabilize society and impose the agendas that benefit them. Representatives of anti-cultism, in their public statements, which they also make in educational institutions, often talk about their concern for the safety of children. However, it is they themselves who are the secret instigators, provoking children to display outbursts of hatred, intolerance, and aggression. It is the representatives of anti-cultism who create conditions in society for children, and sometimes even adults, to take up arms and go shoot other children in schools. Being terrorists themselves, they breed new terrorists. Thus, through the hands of others, they achieve the desired results.